In the dead of night, when most of the kingdom of Aldaria slept peacefully, a secret meeting was taking place in the ancient stone corridors of Rosathorn Palace. 3 figures huddled in whispered conversation, their shadows dancing against tapestried walls that had witnessed centuries of royal intrigue. What they didn't know was that Captain Marcus Blackwood, the most trusted guard in the royal household, stood hidden behind a marble pillar, listening to every treacherous word. By dawn, their conspiracy would either destroy the crown forever or make Princess Elena the strongest ruler Aldaria had ever known. The morning sun cast long golden rays through the tall windows of Rosethorn Palace as Princess Elena Charlotte Victoria stood before her bedroom mirror, brushing her auburn hair with slow, thoughtful strokes. At 26, she had the kind of natural beauty that made artists weep and the kind of sharp intelligence that made politicians nervous. Today, however, something felt different. There was a tension in the air, like the moments before a storm breaks. Elena had always been different from other princesses. While her cousins in neighboring kingdoms spent their days planning elaborate parties and choosing jewelry, Elena preferred reading law books and meeting with farmers about crop yields. Her father, King Theodore, often joked that she was born with a crown on her head and a calculator in her hand. But lately, his jokes had become fewer, and his worried glances had become more frequent. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Your Highness, may I enter?" came the gentle voice of Sarah, her lady-in-waiting and closest friend since childhood. "Of course, Sarah. You know you don't need to ask." Sarah entered with a breakfast tray, but Elena noticed her hands were trembling slightly. Sarah was usually as steady as a rock, having grown up in the palace alongside Elena. They had shared secrets, dreams, and even gotten into trouble together when they were young. If Sarah was nervous, something was definitely wrong. "Your Highness," Sarah began carefully, setting the tray on the small table by the window. "I heard something last night that I think you should know about." Elena turned from the mirror, immediately giving Sarah her full attention. "What is it?" "I couldn't sleep, so I decided to get some warm milk from the kitchen. On my way back, I heard voices coming from the East Tower. You know how sound carries in those old stone hallways? The East Tower had been abandoned for years. It was supposedly being renovated, but Elena had noticed that the renovation seemed to be taking an unusually long time. Her grandmother had once told her that the East Tower was where royal families had hidden during times of war, because it had secret passages that led outside the palace walls. "What kind of voices?" Elena asked, sitting down across from Sarah. I recognized one of them. It was Lord Chancellor Morrison. Sarah paused, biting her lower lip. "And I think they were talking about you, Your Highness." Lord Chancellor Morrison had been her father's advisor for over 15 years. He was a tall, thin man with silver hair and cold gray eyes that never seemed to show any real emotion. Elena had never liked him, but her father trusted him completely. Morrison came from one of the oldest noble families in Aldaria, and he had been educated at the finest universities in Europe. On paper, he was the perfect advisor. But Elena had always felt that there was something calculating about the way he looked at her, as if he were solving a complicated math problem in his head.
"What exactly did you hear, Sarah?"
"Tell me everything, even if it doesn't make sense." Sarah took a deep breath. Lord Morrison was saying something about how the kingdom needed strong leadership, and that certain changes needed to be made before it was too late. Then another voice, I couldn't tell who it was, said that the princess was becoming too popular with the people, and that something had to be done before she gained too much influence. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She had indeed been spending more time with the citizens of Aldaria recently. Just last month, she had visited every major town in the kingdom, listening to people's concerns about rising food prices and unemployment. She had also started a program to provide low-interest loans to small farmers, and had pushed for new laws to protect workers' rights. The response from ordinary citizens had been overwhelmingly positive. Everywhere she went, people cheered and called her the People's Princess. But apparently, not everyone was happy about her growing popularity. "Did you hear anything else?" Elena asked. "Yes, but this is the part that really scared me." The unknown voice said something about arrangements being made and that by the end of the week, the succession question would be resolved permanently. Elena's blood ran cold. The succession question had been a topic of quiet discussion in political circles for months. Her father, King Theodore, was 68 years old, and had been showing signs of fatigue lately. While he was still in good health, everyone knew that the question of who would inherit the throne was becoming more pressing. Elena was the clear heir, but there were distant cousins and other nobles who had their own ideas about who should rule Aldaria.
Sarah, I need you to promise me something. Don't tell anyone else about what you heard.
Not anyone. Can you do that?
Of course, Your Highness.
But what are you going to do? Elena stood up and walked to the window looking out over the capital city of Goldmere. From her bedroom, she could see the red-tiled roofs of houses, the busy marketplace where merchants were setting up their stalls, and the harbor where ships from around the world brought goods and news. This was her kingdom, her people, her responsibility, and apparently someone was planning to take it all away.
I'm going to find out exactly what kind of plot they're planning, Elena said firmly.
And then I'm going to stop it. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of normal royal duties. Elena attended a meeting about updating the kingdom's roads, reviewed budget proposals for new schools, and had lunch with the ambassador from the neighboring kingdom of Valenhall. Through it all, she maintained her usual composed demeanor, but her mind was racing. During the lunch with the ambassador, Elena paid careful attention to Lord Chancellor Morrison, who was also present. He seemed perfectly normal, discussing trade agreements and diplomatic protocols with his usual professional manner. But Elena noticed that he avoided making direct eye contact with her, and when she made a joke that made everyone else laugh, he only gave a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. After lunch, Elena made an excuse about needing to review some documents and retreated to the palace library. The library was one of her favorite places, a vast room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, comfortable reading chairs, and tall windows that let in plenty of natural light. More importantly, it was usually empty in the afternoons, making it the perfect place to think. She was pretending to read a book about agricultural policy when she heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, she saw Captain Marcus Blackwood, the head of her personal security detail. Marcus was in his early 30s with dark hair, serious brown eyes, and the kind of military bearing that made him look reliable and trustworthy. He had been assigned to her protection detail 3 years ago, and in that time Elena had come to respect his judgment and appreciate his quiet competence. "Your Highness," Marcus said with a slight bow, "might I have a word with you privately?" Elena's heart began to race. Marcus never requested private meetings unless something was seriously wrong.
Of course, Captain. Please, sit down. Marcus remained standing, which Elena knew meant he had something very important to tell her. Your Highness, I believe there may be a security concern that you should be aware of.
What kind of security concern? Last night, during my routine patrol of the palace, I observed unusual activity in the East Tower. 3 individuals were meeting there at approximately 2 o'clock in the morning. I was able to observe them from a concealed position. Elena tried to keep her expression neutral, but inside, she was thinking that Sarah had been right. "Did you recognize any of these individuals?" "Yes, Your Highness. One was Lord Chancellor Morrison. The second was Sir Edmund Rothwell." Elena knew Sir Edmund. He was Morrison's deputy and equally untrustworthy in her opinion. The third individual was someone I didn't recognize, but based on his clothing and bearing, I believe he was not from our court. What were they discussing? Marcus hesitated for a moment, and Elena could see that whatever he had overheard was serious enough to make even this experienced soldier uncomfortable. "Your Highness, I believe they were discussing plans to alter the line of succession. I heard references to removing obstacles and ensuring the right person takes the throne. They also mentioned bringing in outside assistance to help with their plans." Elena felt as though the floor had dropped out from under her. This wasn't just palace gossip or political maneuvering. This sounded like treason. "Captain Blackwood, in your professional opinion, do you believe I am in immediate physical danger?" "I cannot rule it out, Your Highness. However, I don't believe they plan to act immediately. From what I overheard, they seem to be waiting for some kind of signal or opportunity." Elena stood up and began pacing around the library, her mind working furiously. She needed more information before she could act. If she accused Lord Chancellor Morrison of treason without solid proof, it would cause a political crisis that could tear the kingdom apart. But if she waited too long, whatever they were planning might succeed. "Captain, I need you to do something for me, and it must remain absolutely confidential."
Of course, Your Highness.
I want you to begin discreet surveillance of Lord Chancellor Morrison and Sir Edmund Rothwell. I also want you to try to identify the third person you saw. But you must be extremely careful not to be detected. Can you do this? Yes, Your Highness. I have several trusted men who can assist with this operation. Good. Also, I want you to review the security protocols for the palace. If someone is planning to bring in outside assistance, we need to make sure our defenses are as strong as possible. Already done, Your Highness. I've quietly increased the number of guards on duty and implemented additional security checks at all entrances. Elena felt a wave of gratitude toward Marcus. He was already thinking ahead, already taking steps to protect her and the kingdom. It made her feel slightly less alone in facing whatever was coming. There's one more thing, Captain. I want you to prepare a secure communication system that would allow me to contact loyal supporters outside the palace if necessary. If this conspiracy is as serious as it sounds, there may come a time when I need help from people who are beyond the reach of palace politics. I understand, Your Highness. I'll set up secure channels with several trusted contacts in the military and among the regional governors. As Marcus left the library, Elena felt both relieved and terrified. On one hand, she now knew that she had at least one person she could trust completely. On the other hand, the conversation had confirmed that her worst fears were probably true. Someone was planning to remove her from the line of succession, and they were willing to use force to do it. The rest of the afternoon dragged by slowly. Elena attended a routine meeting about updating the kingdom's tax policies, but she found it difficult to concentrate. Every time Lord Chancellor Morrison spoke, she found herself analyzing his words for hidden meanings. When he suggested that certain reforms might be necessary to ensure the kingdom's stability, Elena wondered if he was talking about removing her from power. King Theodore looked tired, but he seemed to be in good spirits. They discussed the day's meetings and various administrative matters. Elena wanted desperately to tell him about the conspiracy she had discovered, but she held back. If Lord Chancellor Morrison was involved, and if her father trusted Morrison completely, then there was a chance that her father might not believe her. Worse, he might inadvertently warn Morrison that they knew about his plans. Father, Elena said carefully, I've been thinking about the future of the kingdom, about what will happen when you decide to retire. King Theodore looked up from his soup with surprise. Retire? My dear, I'm nowhere near ready to retire. I may be getting older, but I still have plenty of energy left. But it's natural to think about these things. And I want you to know that I take my responsibilities seriously. I've been spending time with the people, learning about their concerns, preparing myself to serve them well when the time comes. I know you have, Elena, and I'm proud of you. You've become exactly the kind of leader this kingdom needs. King Theodore reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Sometimes I think you care more about our people than I do. I learned that from you, Father. Perhaps, but you've taken it to a new level. The reports I get from your visits to the provinces are remarkable. People genuinely love you, Elena. That's a rare gift for a ruler. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Her father's approval meant everything to her, and it made the thought of losing her position, or worse, losing him, almost unbearable. After dinner, Elena returned to her rooms, but she found it impossible to sleep. She kept thinking about the conversation Sarah had overheard, about Marcus's surveillance report, about the mysterious third person who had been meeting with Morrison and Rothwell. Who could it be? Someone from outside the kingdom, apparently. Someone who could provide assistance with their plans. Around midnight, Elena decided to take a risk. She put on a dark cloak and quietly left her rooms, moving through the palace corridors like a ghost. She knew these hallways better than almost anyone. As a child, she had played hide-and-seek in every corner of the palace. Now, those childhood games might save her kingdom. She made her way carefully toward the East Tower, staying in the shadows and avoiding the main corridors where guards would be patrolling. As she got closer, she could see a faint light coming from one of the tower windows. Someone was there again. Elena found a hidden alcove where she could observe the tower entrance without being seen. She waited for nearly an hour before she saw 3 figures emerge from the tower and walk quickly toward the main palace building. Even in the darkness, she recognized Lord Chancellor Morrison's distinctive, tall, thin silhouette. The second figure was shorter and rounder, probably Sir Edmund Rothwell. But the third figure was someone she had never seen before. He was a large man, powerfully built, wearing dark clothing that looked more like military gear than court dress. He moved with the kind of confidence that suggested he was comfortable with violence. As the three men passed closer to her hiding spot, Elena heard the stranger speaking in a foreign accent she couldn't quite identify. "The timeline has been moved up," the stranger was saying. "My employer wants this finished by the end of the week." "That doesn't give us much time to prepare," Morrison replied nervously. "You've had months to prepare," the stranger said coldly. "All the arrangements are in place. When the princess makes her scheduled visit to the orphanage on Friday, we'll have our opportunity. After that, the succession question will be permanently resolved." Elena's blood turned to ice. She was indeed scheduled to visit the St. Catherine's orphanage on Friday morning. It was a routine charity visit that had been planned for weeks, but apparently, Morrison and his allies were planning to use that visit as an opportunity to what? Kidnap her? Kill her? The three men continued walking toward the main palace, and their voices faded into the distance. Elena remained in her hiding spot for several more minutes, her mind racing. She now knew when they were planning to act, but she still didn't know exactly what they intended to do. More importantly, she didn't know who the mysterious employer was that the foreign stranger had mentioned. When Elena finally returned to her rooms, she found Sarah waiting for her, looking worried.
"Your Highness, where have you been? I was so worried when I found your bed empty."
Elena quickly told Sarah everything she had overheard. Sarah's face grew pale as she listened. "Your Highness, you have to cancel the visit to the orphanage. It's obviously a trap." "I can't cancel it, Sarah. If I do, they'll know that I'm aware of their plans and they'll just find another opportunity. Besides, if I start canceling public appearances, it will look like I'm afraid of my own people. That would damage my reputation and play right into their hands. But Your Highness, if they're planning to hurt you, they won't succeed," Elena said firmly, "because now we know what they're planning. Captain Blackwood and I can prepare for whatever they have in mind. We can turn their trap against them." Sarah looked skeptical, but she nodded. "What do you want me to do? Tomorrow morning I want you to send a discreet message to my cousin Prince Alexander in Valenhall. Tell him that I may need his help soon, but don't give him any details. Just ask him to be ready to assist me if I call on him." Prince Alexander was Elena's favorite cousin and the heir to the neighboring kingdom. More importantly, he commanded his own regiment of elite soldiers and had always been completely loyal to Elena and her family. If worst came to worst, Alexander might be the only person with the power to help her reclaim her throne. "I also want you to pack a small bag with essential items and keep it hidden but ready. If things go badly on Friday, we may need to leave the palace quickly." "Yes, Your Highness, but I still think you should tell the king about this." Elena considered this for a long moment. "Not yet, Sarah. If I'm wrong about Morrison, I'll destroy an innocent man's reputation and create a political crisis for nothing. If I'm right about Morrison, but my father doesn't believe me, then Morrison will have advance warning that we know about his plans. Either way, telling my father right now could make things worse." "Then when will you tell him?" "After Friday. Once I have proof of what Morrison and his allies are really planning, then I'll tell my father everything. But until then, we have to handle this ourselves." As Elena finally prepared for bed, she felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. Tomorrow, she would begin preparing for what might be the fight of her life. But she also knew that she had loyal friends like Sarah and Marcus Blackwood on her side. And most importantly, she knew that she was fighting not just for her own future, but for the future of everyone in Aldaria who believed in justice and fairness. The game had begun, and Princess Elena was ready to play. The next morning arrived gray and cloudy, matching Elena's mood perfectly. She had barely slept, her mind churning with plans and contingencies for the dangerous game she was now playing. As she dressed for the day, choosing a simple blue dress that would allow her to move quickly if necessary, Sarah helped her pin a small communication device that Captain Blackwood had provided into the lining of her jacket. "Remember, Your Highness, if you press this button twice, it will send an immediate alert to Captain Blackwood and his men," Sarah explained nervously. "But it only works within the palace grounds." "I understand. And you sent the message to Prince Alexander?" "Yes, though I had to be very careful about the wording. I told him that you were dealing with some complex political situations and might need his friendship and support in the coming days." Elena nodded approvingly.
Alexander was smart enough to read between the lines of such a message. He would know that she was in some kind of trouble without knowing the specific details that could be dangerous if intercepted. The morning's schedule was packed with routine meetings, but Elena found it almost impossible to concentrate. During a budget review session, she caught Lord Chancellor Morrison watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Was it calculation? Pity? Guilt? Whatever it was, it made her skin crawl. "Your Highness," Morrison said during a brief break in the meeting, "I wanted to commend you on your upcoming visit to St. Catherine's Orphanage. Your dedication to charitable work is truly admirable." The false warmth in his voice made Elena want to scream, but she managed to smile politely. "Thank you, Lord Chancellor. I believe it's important for the royal family to show support for our most vulnerable citizens, indeed, though I do hope you'll be careful. There have been some reports of unrest in that part of the city lately. Perhaps it would be wise to increase your security detail for tomorrow's visit." Elena's heart nearly stopped. Was this part of their plan? Were they hoping to use security concerns as an excuse to surround her with guards who were actually working for them? "I appreciate your concern," she replied carefully, "but I don't want the children to be frightened by too many guards. A small, discreet security presence should be sufficient." Morrison's eyes flashed with something that might have been annoyance, but he nodded politely. "Of course, Your Highness. I'm sure Captain Blackwood will make appropriate arrangements." After the meeting, Elena immediately sought out Captain Blackwood. She found him in the palace security office, studying maps and personnel files with intense concentration. "Captain, Lord Chancellor Morrison just suggested increasing my security detail for tomorrow's visit to the orphanage. He claimed there have been reports of unrest in that area." Marcus looked up sharply. "There have been no such reports, Your Highness. That section of the city has been completely peaceful for months. So, he was lying. It appears so, which confirms our suspicions about his involvement in whatever is being planned." Marcus set down the file he had been reading and turned to face Elena directly. "Your Highness, I've completed my investigation into the third man we observed meeting with Morrison and Rothwell. What did you find?" "His name is Viktor Kozlov, and he's a mercenary with connections to several criminal organizations across Europe. He specializes in what he calls political solutions to complex problems." Elena felt sick to her stomach. "You mean assassinations?" "Among other things, yes. He's also been involved in kidnappings, coups, and various other forms of political violence. Most importantly, our intelligence sources suggest that he's currently working for someone with significant financial resources and political ambitions." "Do we know who?" "Not yet, but I have my best people investigating. What we do know is that whoever hired Kozlov wants to destabilize our kingdom's government, and they're willing to pay a great deal of money to make it happen." Elena began pacing around the small office, her mind working furiously. "Captain, I need to know something. In your professional opinion, if they're planning to act tomorrow during my visit to the orphanage, what are they most likely to do?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing his words carefully. "There are several possibilities, Your Highness. They could attempt to kidnap you and hold you hostage until your father agrees to certain political concessions. They could stage what appears to be an accident or an attack by criminals, which would give them an excuse to declare martial law and take control of the government. Or they could simply kill me and claim that my death was the result of civil unrest, which would create enough chaos to allow them to seize power." "Yes, Your Highness. That's also a possibility." Elena stopped pacing and looked directly at Marcus. "Captain, I want you to know that I'm not going to run away from this. Tomorrow, I'm going to keep my appointment at the orphanage, and we're going to catch these traitors in the act. Your Highness, with respect, that's an extremely dangerous plan. It's the only plan that makes sense. If I cancel the visit or try to avoid the confrontation, they'll just find another opportunity, and next time we might not have advance warning. But if we let them make their move tomorrow, we can gather the evidence we need to prove their treason. And if something goes wrong, then you'll be there to make sure it doesn't." Elena smiled grimly. "Besides, they're not expecting us to know about their plans. That gives us a significant advantage." Marcus nodded slowly. "Very well, Your Highness, but I insist on several conditions. First, I want to position additional security personnel around the orphanage, disguised as ordinary citizens. Second, I want you to wear body armor under your dress,
even though it will be uncomfortable. Third, I want you to promise me that if I give you a signal to leave immediately, you'll do so without question. Agreed. What else do you need from me? I need you to act completely normal for the rest of today. Don't do anything that might alert Morrison or his allies that we know about their plans. Can you do that? Elena nodded, though she knew it would be one of the hardest things she had ever done. The rest of the day passed with agonizing slowness. Elena attended a diplomatic reception for the ambassador from the Kingdom of Westmarch, smiled and made polite conversation with various nobles and officials, and even managed to laugh at Lord Chancellor Morrison's jokes during dinner. But all the while, she was acutely aware that some of the people in the room were planning to betray her and her family. During the diplomatic reception, Elena noticed something interesting. Sir Edmund Rothwell, Morrison's deputy, kept checking his pocket watch and whispering to various people throughout the evening. At one point, she saw him having an intense conversation with Lord Frederick Ashworth, a minor noble who had always seemed bitter about his family's relatively low status in the court hierarchy. Elena made a mental note to tell Marcus about Ashworth's apparent involvement in the conspiracy. The more people involved, the more dangerous the situation became, but it also meant there were more opportunities for the conspirators to make mistakes. Late that evening, after the reception had ended and most of the guests had gone home, Elena was returning to her rooms when she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. She was walking through one of the palace's side corridors when she heard voices coming from a nearby alcove. She quickly pressed herself against the wall and listened carefully. "Everything is set for tomorrow," she heard Sir Edmund Rothwell saying. "The foreign specialist has already positioned his people around the orphanage. And you're certain the princess will be there." This voice belonged to Lord Ashworth, absolutely. She never cancels charity visits, especially ones involving children. It would damage her precious reputation as the people's princess. Elena heard what sounded like bitter laughter. "Once she's out of the way," Rothwell continued, "Morrison will be able to convince the king that emergency measures are necessary to maintain stability. Within a week, we'll have effective control of the government. And the king? Will be kept comfortable and safe as long as he cooperates with the new political reality. If he doesn't," Rothwell's voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. Elena felt rage building inside her chest. These men weren't just planning to remove her from the succession. They were planning to overthrow her father and take control of the entire kingdom. This was far worse than she had imagined. "What about Prince Alexander and Valenhall?" Lord Ashworth asked. "Won't he object to these changes?" "Prince Alexander is young and inexperienced. Besides, once we control Aldaria's army and treasury, he won't be in a position to object to anything. Our employer has assured us that neighboring kingdoms will be encouraged to accept the new government." Elena's heart sank as she realized the true scope of the conspiracy. This wasn't just a palace coup. It was part of a larger plan involving multiple kingdoms and foreign interests. But who was the mysterious employer that Rothwell had mentioned? As the voices faded away, Elena hurried back to her rooms, her mind racing. She needed to get word to Marcus immediately, but she also needed to be careful not to alert any palace staff who might be working with the conspirators. She found Sarah waiting in her sitting room, looking pale and anxious. "Your Highness, thank goodness you're back. I've been so worried." Elena quickly told Sarah what she had overheard, watching as her friend's face grew paler with each detail. "Your Highness, this is much worse than we thought. They're not just planning to remove you. They're planning to take over the entire kingdom."
I know.
"And I think there are more people involved than we initially realized." Elena described her observations of Lord Ashworth and his apparent involvement in the conspiracy. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to send an urgent message to Captain Blackwood, and then I'm going to try to get a few hours of sleep before tomorrow. I have a feeling I'm going to need all my strength." Sarah nodded and immediately began preparing a coded message for Marcus, using a system they had developed earlier that day. Within 30 minutes, the message had been discreetly delivered to the captain's quarters. An hour later, Marcus appeared at Elena's door, dressed in civilian clothes and moving with the quiet efficiency that marked him as a professional soldier. "Your Highness, I received your message. This changes our situation significantly." "I know. Do you think we should call off tomorrow's plan and try to warn my father instead?" Marcus considered this carefully. "No, Your Highness. If anything, this makes it more important that we gather solid evidence of their treason. Without proof, Accusations against Lord Chancellor Morrison and the others would just look like palace intrigue. But if we can catch them in the act tomorrow, we'll have everything we need to stop this conspiracy permanently. Have you identified any other people who might be involved? Yes, actually. Based on the information you provided about Lord Ashworth, I did some discreet checking. It appears that at least 6 minor nobles and 3 senior palace staff members are part of this conspiracy. That's more than we initially estimated, but it's still a manageable number. Elena felt a wave of sadness as she realized how many people she had trusted were actually working against her. Some of these individuals had been part of her life since childhood. Captain, there's something else I overheard that I think you should know about. They mentioned having an employer who has assured them that neighboring kingdoms will accept the new government. That suggests this conspiracy has international backing. Marcus's expression grew even more serious. That's what I was afraid of, Your Highness. Viktor Kozlov, the mercenary we identified, is known to work for a criminal organization that has connections to several European governments.
If they're involved, this conspiracy is about more than just controlling Aldaria. It's part of a larger geopolitical strategy. What kind of strategy?
Destabilization of small, independent kingdoms like ours, probably with the goal of bringing them under the control of larger powers.
Aldaria's location makes us strategically valuable for trade and military purposes. If someone could control our government, they could use our ports, our resources, and our military to project power throughout this region. Elena felt overwhelmed by the scope of what they were facing. This wasn't just about palace politics or even national sovereignty. It was about the future of her entire region. Captain, do you think we're strong enough to fight something this large? Your Highness, we have several advantages that our enemies don't know about. First, we know about their plans while they think their conspiracy is secret. Second, you have genuine popular support among the people of Aldaria while they're trying to impose an illegitimate government. Third, your cousin Prince Alexander commands significant military resources and would almost certainly come to our aid if we asked. And fourth? Marcus smiled for the first time since this crisis had begun. Fourth, Your Highness, you're much stronger and smarter than they think you are. They're expecting to face a naive young princess. Instead, they're going to face a true leader who's willing to fight for her people. Elena felt a surge of determination. Then let's make sure we're ready for them. They spent the next hour going over detailed plans for tomorrow's operation. Marcus would position additional security around the orphanage, but they would be disguised as ordinary citizens, maintenance workers, shopkeepers, parents with children. Elena would wear discreet body armor and carry a hidden communication device. Most importantly, they would document everything that happened, gathering the evidence they needed to prove the conspiracy. There's one more thing, Your Highness, Marcus said as he prepared to leave. I've taken the liberty of preparing a secure escape route from the orphanage, just in case things go badly tomorrow. There's a network of safe houses throughout the city, staffed by people I trust completely. You think we might need to run? I think we should be prepared for any possibility. But Your Highness, if tomorrow goes according to plan, we won't just escape this conspiracy. We'll destroy it completely. After Marcus left, Elena finally tried to get some sleep, but her mind was too active to rest properly. She kept thinking about the children at St. Diamede, Catherine's orphanage, and how they would be affected if violence broke out during her visit. She also thought about her father, sleeping peacefully in his chambers, unaware that his most trusted advisor was planning to overthrow him. Most of all, she thought about the people of Aldaria, the farmers and merchants and workers who had cheered for her during her recent visits to the provinces. They believed in her. They trusted her to represent their interests and protect their way of life. Tomorrow, she would either prove worthy of that trust, or she would fail them completely. As dawn approached, Elena finally drifted off into an uneasy sleep, her dreams filled with shadows and whispers and the faces of people she could no longer trust. When Sarah woke her 3 hours later, Elena felt as though she hadn't slept at all. Good morning, Your Highness. How are you feeling? Elena sat up slowly, her body stiff with tension and exhaustion, like I'm about to fight the most important battle of my life. Well then, Sarah said with forced cheerfulness, let's make sure you're properly equipped for victory. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear, with golden sunlight streaming through Elena's bedroom windows. Under normal circumstances, she would have appreciated the beautiful weather for her visit to the orphanage. Today, however, the bright sunshine felt almost mocking, like nature was refusing to acknowledge the darkness of what was about to unfold. Sarah helped Elena dress carefully, first fitting the lightweight body armor that Marcus had provided under her cream-colored dress, then pinning the communication device securely inside her jacket. Elena chose comfortable but elegant shoes that would allow her to run if necessary, and wore minimal jewelry that couldn't be easily grabbed or used against her. "Remember, Your Highness," Sarah said as she adjusted Elena's hair one final time, "Captain Blackwood's signal for immediate evacuation is if he touches his left ear twice. If you see that signal, you're to move directly to the main entrance where a car will be waiting." "I remember everything, Sarah. The question is whether Morrison and his people will stick to their plan or if they'll change tactics at the last minute. Do you think they suspect that you know about their conspiracy?" Elena considered this as she checked her appearance in the mirror one last time. "I don't think so. Lord Chancellor Morrison seemed completely normal at yesterday's meetings, and if they suspected I knew, they would probably cancel their plans and wait for another opportunity." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. "Your Highness," came the voice of Marcus Blackwood, "your car is ready for departure." Elena took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. "Well, Sarah, I suppose it's time to find out what kind of princess I really am." The drive to St. Catherine's Orphanage took 20 minutes through the winding streets of Goldmere. Elena sat in the back of the royal car, watching ordinary citizens going about their morning routines, shopping at markets, walking to work, children playing in small parks. These were her people, and everything she was about to do was for them. Marcus sat in the front passenger seat, occasionally speaking into a discreet radio device. Elena knew he was coordinating with the additional security personnel who were already in position around the orphanage. From her perspective, the street looked completely normal, but she trusted that Marcus's people were watching from hidden positions. As they approached St. Catherine's, Elena could see the familiar red brick building with its cheerful yellow shutters and well-maintained garden. A small crowd of children was visible through the windows, their faces pressed against the glass as they watched for the royal car. Elena felt a stab of guilt, knowing that her visit was putting these innocent children in potential danger. The car pulled up to the main entrance, where Sister Margaret, the orphanage director, was waiting with a warm smile. Sister Margaret was a plump, energetic woman in her 60s who had dedicated her entire adult life to caring for abandoned children. Elena had known her for years and considered her one of the most genuinely good people she had ever met. "Your Highness, welcome to St. Catherine's," Sister Margaret said as Elena stepped out of the car. "The children are absolutely thrilled about your visit." "Thank you, Sister Margaret. I'm looking forward to seeing them again." As they walked toward the entrance, Elena discreetly scanned the surrounding area. She noticed a man in work clothes pretending to repair a street lamp about 50 meters away, undoubtedly one of Marcus's security people. Across the street, a woman was sitting on a bench reading a newspaper, but Elena could see that her eyes were actually focused on the orphanage entrance. Everything seemed normal, but Elena could feel tension in the air like an approaching thunderstorm. Inside the orphanage, Elena was greeted by 37 children, ranging in age from 5 to 17. They had prepared a small presentation for her visit, including songs, drawings, and stories about their dreams for the future. Today, she struggled to concentrate, constantly listening for unusual sounds or watching for signs that something was wrong. "Your Highness," said 8-year-old Timothy, a boy with bright red hair and freckles, "Sister Margaret says you might be the queen someday. Is that true?" Elena knelt down to Timothy's eye level, smiling despite her nervousness. "Well, Timothy, my father is the king, and someday when he's ready to retire, I might take his place. But being a queen isn't about wearing a crown or living in a fancy palace. It's about serving people and making sure everyone in the kingdom is safe and happy." "Like making sure orphanages have enough food and warm blankets?" asked 10-year-old Maria. "Exactly like that." As Elena continued talking with the children, she noticed Marcus standing near the main entrance, his posture alert but relaxed. So far, everything was proceeding exactly as scheduled. Sister Margaret led Elena on a tour of the facility, showing her the dormitories, classrooms, and dining hall. Elena had visited St. Catherine's several times before, but today she paid special attention to the building's layout, identifying potential exits and places where she could take cover if violence erupted. They were in the main playroom watching a group of younger children playing with wooden toys when Elena noticed Marcus touching his radio device. A moment later, he caught her eye and nodded almost imperceptibly. Something was happening. Elena continued her conversation with Sister Margaret, but her senses were now on high alert. Through the playroom windows, she could see what looked like a normal street scene. But she noticed that several people seemed to be converging on the area around the orphanage. A delivery truck had parked nearby, even though she didn't see anyone making deliveries. Two men in dark suits were walking slowly down the sidewalk, their eyes focused on the orphanage rather than where they were going. "Your Highness," Sister Margaret was saying, "we're hoping to expand our educational programs next year. With your support, we could hire additional teachers and provide more advanced classes for our older children." "That sounds wonderful, Sister Margaret. I'll make sure to discuss it with the appropriate ministers when I return to the palace." As they spoke, Elena heard the sound of multiple vehicles arriving outside. Through the window, she could see that Lord Chancellor Morrison had arrived in an official government car, accompanied by Sir Edmund Rothwell and several palace guards she didn't recognize. This was definitely not part of the planned schedule. Marcus appeared at Elena's side with silent efficiency. "Your Highness, Lord Chancellor Morrison is here to see you. He says there's an urgent matter that requires your immediate attention." Elena felt her heart rate accelerate, but she kept her voice calm and steady. "Of course, Captain. Please ask him to wait in the main entrance area. I'll be there in a moment." As Marcus left to relay the message, Elena turned to Sister Margaret. "I'm sorry, but it seems I need to deal with some unexpected government business. Could you please take the children to the dining hall and keep them there until I'm finished?" Sister Margaret looked puzzled, but nodded. "Of course, Your Highness. Children, let's go have some milk and cookies while Princess Elena takes care of her important work." As the children filed out of the playroom, Elena took a moment to check her hidden communication device and make sure her body armor was properly positioned. Whatever was about to happen, she was as ready as she could be. She walked to the main entrance area where Lord Chancellor Morrison was waiting with an expression of grave concern that looked completely genuine. If Elena hadn't known about his treachery, she would have been completely convinced by his performance. "Your Highness, thank goodness I found you," Morrison said, approaching her with apparent relief. "I'm afraid there's been a serious development at the palace that requires your immediate return." "What kind of development?" "Intelligence reports suggest that there may be a threat to your father's safety. We've received information about a possible assassination plot, and His Majesty has requested that all members of the royal family return to the palace immediately for enhanced security briefings." Elena felt a chill of fear, not because she believed Morrison's story, but because she realized how clever his plan was. If she agreed to return to the palace immediately, she would be walking directly into whatever trap they had prepared. If she refused, it would look like she was ignoring a threat to her father's life. "This is very concerning news, Lord Chancellor. Can you tell me more about the nature of this threat?" "I'm afraid the details are too sensitive to discuss here, Your Highness, but I can assure you that our security services consider it a credible and immediate danger." Elena noticed that Sir Edmund Rothwell had positioned himself near the orphanage entrance, effectively blocking her primary escape route. The palace guards who had accompanied Morrison were also in strategic positions around the main room, but she also noticed that Marcus was standing calmly near the back entrance, his hand resting casually near his weapon. "Lord Chancellor, I appreciate your concern for my father's safety. However, I find it strange that this threat emerged so suddenly, and that you felt it necessary to come personally to retrieve me rather than simply sending a message." Morrison's eyes flickered with what might have been annoyance, but his expression remained concerned and professional. "Your Highness, in situations involving potential threats to the royal family, we follow very specific security protocols. Personal retrieval of family members is standard procedure." "I see. And these security protocols were developed by whom?" "By our intelligence services, in consultation with foreign security experts." Elena felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The foreign security experts Morrison mentioned were probably connected to the mysterious employer who had hired Viktor Kozlov. This whole operation was designed to look like a legitimate security response while actually facilitating the conspiracy. "Lord Chancellor, before I agree to return to the palace, I'd like to speak directly with Captain Blackwood about these security concerns." "I'm afraid Captain Blackwood has already been briefed and agrees that immediate evacuation is necessary," Morrison replied smoothly. "Time is of the essence, Your Highness." Elena looked toward Marcus, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. Morrison was lying about Marcus's agreement with the evacuation plan. Very well, Elena said, making a decision that would either save her kingdom or doom it completely. But before we leave, I insist on ensuring that the children here are safe. If there's a legitimate security threat in the area, we can't simply abandon innocent children to potential danger. Morrison's mask of concern slipped slightly. Your Highness, the children are not targets of this threat. Our priority must be your safety and that of your father. My priority is the safety of all citizens of Alderia, especially children. Captain Blackwood, please coordinate with Sister Margaret to implement appropriate security measures for the orphanage. Of course, Your Highness, Marcus replied. I'll also need to verify the current threat assessment with palace security before we proceed with any evacuation. Elena saw Morrison's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. His plan was falling apart because she was refusing to simply follow his instructions without question. Your Highness, Morrison said, his voice taking on a harder edge, I must insist that we leave immediately. The intelligence we've received suggests that the threat level is extremely high, and every minute we delay puts you and your father in greater danger. Then you won't mind if I call my father directly to discuss these security concerns with him. Elena pulled out her mobile phone and began dialing the palace. She knew that if Morrison's story was true, her father would answer immediately and confirm the emergency. If Morrison was lying, her father would be confused about the supposed threat. Your Highness, Morrison said urgently, please don't make that call. Our intelligence sources have indicated that palace communications may be compromised. If you contact the palace directly, you could be alerting the very people who are planning to harm your father. Elena stopped dialing but kept the phone in her hand. That's a very convenient excuse, Lord Chancellor. But if palace communications are truly compromised, how were you able to receive reliable intelligence about this threat? Morrison's face was beginning to show signs of strain. Through secure military channels that are not accessible to palace staff. I see. And these military channels are controlled by whom? By our allied intelligence services, working in coordination with trusted international partners. Elena felt a surge of anger as Morrison's words confirmed her worst suspicions. The trusted international partners were undoubtedly the same foreign powers who wanted to control Alderia's government. Lord Chancellor, Elena said, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she had learned from her father, I'm beginning to suspect that this entire situation is not what it appears to be. Morrison's expression hardened completely, and Elena saw him make a subtle gesture to Sir Edmund Rothwell. The palace guards who had accompanied Morrison began moving closer to Elena's position. Your Highness, Morrison said, his voice now cold and formal, I must insist that you accompany us to the palace immediately. This is not a request. Elena felt time slowing down as the critical moment arrived. Everything now depended on whether Marcus and his security team were ready to act, and whether she had the courage to fight for her kingdom. Captain Blackwood, Elena said clearly, I believe Lord Chancellor Morrison and his associates are not acting in the best interests of the royal family or the kingdom of Alderia. Marcus stepped forward immediately, his hand moving to his weapon. Your Highness, I concur with your assessment. At the same time, Elena pressed the emergency button on her hidden communication device twice, sending an immediate alert to Marcus's backup team. Morrison's facade finally dropped completely. Secure the princess, he ordered the palace guards. She's clearly suffering from stress-induced paranoia and requires protective custody for her own safety. But as the guards moved toward Elena, the orphanage's back entrance burst open and several of Marcus's security personnel entered with weapons drawn. From outside, Elena could hear the sound of vehicles arriving rapidly. Lord Chancellor Morrison, Marcus said formally, you and your associates are under arrest for treason against the crown and conspiracy to overthrow the lawful government of Alderia. Morrison looked around wildly, realizing that his carefully planned operation had become a disaster. This is outrageous. I am acting under direct orders from Allied intelligence services to protect the princess from a legitimate security threat. Your Highness, Marcus said to Elena, we have documented evidence of Lord Chancellor Morrison's meetings with foreign mercenaries and his plans to remove you from the line of succession. We also have recordings of conversations between his associates discussing the overthrow of your father's government. Elena felt a tremendous sense of relief mixed with lingering adrenaline. The gamble had worked. They had caught the conspirators in the act and gathered the evidence needed to prove their treason. "Lord Chancellor Morrison," Elena said, her voice steady and strong, "you are relieved of all duties and authorities. Sir Edmund Rothwell, you are similarly relieved. All of you will be held for questioning regarding your participation in this conspiracy against the crown." As Marcus's security team began restraining the conspirators, Elena heard the sound of children crying from the dining hall. The confrontation had been loud enough to frighten them, and Elena knew her first priority now was to reassure them that they were safe. But before she could move toward the dining hall, the front door of the orphanage exploded inward with tremendous force. Through the smoking ruins of the orphanage entrance, Viktor Kozlov stepped into the main hall like a nightmare made flesh. The massive mercenary was exactly as Elena had imagined him, powerfully built, moving with deadly purpose, wearing dark tactical gear that marked him as a professional killer. Behind him came 4 other men, all armed and ready for violence. "Well, well," Kozlov said in his heavily accented English, his voice carrying the cold amusement of someone who enjoyed creating fear. "It seems our political friends have made quite a mess of things." Elena's protective detail immediately moved into defensive positions, but Kozlov's men had the advantage of surprise and superior firepower. Marcus stepped protectively in front of Elena, his weapon drawn but his face grim as he assessed their tactical disadvantage. "Kozlov," Lord Chancellor Morrison said desperately, "the operation can still succeed. We just need to adapt our approach." Kozlov laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Adapt? You idiots couldn't handle one young woman and a handful of palace guards. My employer is most displeased." Elena felt her fear transforming into rage. These men had planned to murder her, overthrow her father, and terrorize innocent children. More importantly, they represented foreign powers who wanted to destroy her kingdom's independence. She had spent her entire life preparing to serve her people, and she refused to let these criminals steal their future. "Mr. Denov Zinger." "Kozlov?" Elena said, stepping slightly forward despite Marcus's attempts to shield her. "I assume you're here to complete the mission that Lord Chancellor Morrison botched so badly." "Princess Elena," Kozlov replied with mock courtesy, "you are much braver than my employer expected. But yes, you are correct. My instructions are quite clear. The succession question must be resolved permanently." "Before you resolve anything permanently," Elena said, "perhaps you'd like to know that this entire conversation is being recorded and transmitted directly to military commanders throughout the kingdom." Kozlov's expression flickered with uncertainty. "You're lying." Elena smiled coldly. "Captain Blackwood, please confirm the status of our communication systems." "Broadcasting live to Central Command, Your Highness," Marcus replied firmly. "General Patterson and the entire Defense Council are receiving real-time intelligence on this situation." This wasn't entirely true. Elena was bluffing based on equipment she hoped Marcus had prepared, but Kozlov didn't know that, and she could see doubt creeping into his eyes. "Furthermore," Elena continued, "Prince Alexander of Valenhall crossed our border 1 hour ago with a battalion of elite troops, responding to my request for assistance with a security situation. If anything happens to me, he has orders to assume temporary control of Aldaria's government and hunt down everyone involved in this conspiracy." This was also a bluff, but Elena delivered it with such confidence that even Morrison looked shaken. "Your Highness," Morrison said frantically, "none of this is necessary. We can still reach a reasonable political arrangement that serves everyone's interests. The only arrangement I'm interested in," Elena replied, "is seeing all of you in prison for the rest of your lives." Kozlov raised his weapon, clearly deciding that negotiation was pointless. "My employer wants this finished now." But before he could fire, the sound of helicopters filled the air outside the orphanage. Elena's heart leaped as she recognized the distinctive sound of military aircraft. Someone was coming to help, though she wasn't sure who. "Kozlov!" came a commanding voice from outside the building, amplified by a megaphone. "This is General Patterson of the Royal Defense Force. You and your associates are surrounded by 3 companies of elite troops. Surrender immediately and you will not be harmed." Elena nearly collapsed with relief. General Patterson was her father's most trusted military commander, a man of absolute integrity and loyalty to the crown. If he was here, it meant her bluffs about live communication had somehow become reality. Kozlov's face twisted with fury. Impossible. Our intelligence indicated that the military command was not aware of this operation. Elena said simply, Captain Blackwood has been in contact with General Patterson since yesterday, coordinating our response to your employer's conspiracy. Through the broken entrance, Elena could see military vehicles and soldiers taking positions around the orphanage. General Patterson himself appeared in the doorway, a tall, distinguished man in his 50s wearing full military dress uniform. Your Highness, General Patterson said with a formal bow, I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but we received your emergency transmission and responded with all available speed. He had apparently been planning for this contingency all along, maintaining communication with loyal military commanders even as they played their dangerous game with Morrison and his conspirators. General, Elena replied, your timing is perfect. We have apprehended several individuals involved in a conspiracy to overthrow my father's government, and we have documented evidence of their collusion with foreign interests. Kozlov looked around the room, assessing his options. His men were well trained, but they were outnumbered by at least 20-1, and their position was tactically hopeless. Elena could see him calculating whether he could complete his mission before being killed or captured. Kozlov, General Patterson called out, I want you to know that we have already arrested your local support network, including the individuals you stationed around this building. We also have extensive intelligence on your employer's activities in our region. Surrender now and you'll be treated according to international law. Continue to resist, and I cannot guarantee your survival. Elena saw something shift in Kozlov's expression. For the first time, he looked genuinely worried rather than simply angry. Princess, Kozlov said slowly, perhaps we can reach an accommodation. My employer values stability above all else, and a negotiated solution might serve everyone's interests. The only solution I'm interested in, Elena replied firmly, is justice for the crimes you and your associates have committed against the Kingdom of Alderia. Your Highness, Lord Chancellor Morrison interrupted desperately. Please consider the broader implications of this situation. The international pressures that led to this crisis won't disappear just because you've arrested us. There are larger forces at work here, and compromising with them might be more practical than fighting them. Elena turned to face Morrison directly, feeling the full weight of her royal heritage and her responsibility to her people. Lord Chancellor Morrison, you've spent your entire career serving the interests of foreign powers rather than the people of Alderia. You've betrayed my father's trust, conspired against our government, and put innocent children in danger. There will be no compromise with traitors and criminals. General Patterson, Elena continued, please take these individuals into custody and ensure they receive appropriate medical care and legal representation. I want this entire matter handled according to our highest standards of justice. As soldiers moved in to arrest the conspirators, Elena heard a small voice from the direction of the dining hall. Princess Elena, are you okay? She turned to see Timothy, the 8-year-old boy with red hair, peeking around the corner with concern in his eyes. Behind him, she could see other children and Sister Margaret watching anxiously. Elena's anger melted away, replaced by overwhelming relief that the children were safe and that the crisis was finally over. Yes, Timothy, I'm okay, she said gently. There was some trouble with some very bad men who wanted to hurt people, but the good men came to help us, and now everyone is safe. Are you still going to be the queen someday? Elena looked around the room, taking in the scene of arrested conspirators, loyal soldiers, and worried children. For the first time in days, she felt completely certain about her answer. Yes, Timothy, I am. And when I'm queen, I'm going to make sure that people like you are always safe and protected. As the children were led to safety and the conspirators were taken away, Elena found herself alone with General Patterson and Captain Blackwood. Your Highness, General Patterson said, I need to brief you on the larger scope of this conspiracy. Our investigation has revealed that at least 3 other small kingdoms in this region have faced similar destabilization efforts. Your successful resistance to this plot may have prevented a much larger political crisis. What about my father? Does he know what happened? King Theodore has been fully briefed, and is extremely proud of your handling of this situation. He's also rather angry with himself for trusting Lord Chancellor Morrison for so long. Elena nodded, feeling a complex mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. General, I want complete investigations into everyone who was involved in this conspiracy, including any palace staff or government officials who may have provided assistance. I also want a comprehensive review of our security procedures to prevent similar infiltrations in the future. Already underway, Your Highness. We're also coordinating with intelligence services from allied kingdoms to identify and neutralize the foreign organization that sponsored this operation. And Captain Blackwood, Elena said, turning to Marcus, I owe you an enormous debt of gratitude. Your planning and loyalty probably saved not just my life, but our entire kingdom. Marcus bowed formally. Your Highness, it was an honor to serve. But, if I may say so, your courage and intelligence were what really defeated this conspiracy. A lesser leader would have panicked or compromised with the traitors. As they prepared to return to the palace, Elena took one last look around St. Catherine's orphanage. The building would need repairs from the damage caused by Kozlov's explosive entrance, but the children were safe and the future of the kingdom was secure. 3 hours later, Elena stood in her father's private study, giving him a complete briefing on everything that had happened. King Theodore looked older and more tired than she had ever seen him, but also proud and determined. Elena, he said when she had finished her report, I owe you an apology. I should have listened more carefully to your concerns about Morrison and his associates. More importantly, I should have recognized how much you've grown as a leader. Father, you couldn't have known about Morrison's treachery. He was very skilled at deception, perhaps. But I should have trusted your instincts about people and politics. You've always been more perceptive than I gave you credit for. King Theodore stood up and walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens. Elena, I've been thinking about the future of our kingdom and about when I should begin transferring more responsibilities to you. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. Father, you don't need to make any immediate decisions about succession. You're still in excellent health and perfectly capable of ruling. I'm 68 years old, and this crisis has reminded me that unexpected challenges can emerge at any time. More importantly, you've proven that you're ready for greater responsibilities. He turned back to face her. I want to begin a gradual transition process, starting with naming you as Crown Princess and giving you expanded authority over domestic policy. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. After everything she had been through, her father's confidence in her abilities meant more than any crown or title ever could. Father, I accept these responsibilities, and I promise to serve our people with the same dedication and integrity that you've shown throughout your reign. I know you will, Elena, and I know that when the time comes for you to become queen, Alderia will be in excellent hands. 2 weeks later, Elena stood on the balcony of Rosathorn Palace, looking out over a crowd of thousands of citizens who had gathered to celebrate the announcement of her new title as Crown Princess. The investigation into the conspiracy had revealed the full scope of the foreign plot against their kingdom, and the people of Alderia were deeply grateful for her courage in defeating it. But more than gratitude, Elena could see hope in their faces, hope for a future where their kingdom would remain independent and strong, where their voices would be heard by their leaders, where justice would prevail over corruption and fear. Your Highness, Sarah said, joining her on the balcony. Are you ready for your speech? Elena took one last look at the crowd below, then turned toward the microphone that would carry her words throughout the kingdom. Yes, Sarah, I'm ready. As she began to speak, Elena thought about the lessons she had learned during the crisis that had nearly destroyed her kingdom. She had learned that leadership required not just intelligence and compassion, but also courage and the willingness to fight for what was right. She had learned that loyalty was earned through service to others, not demanded through position or authority. Most importantly, she had learned that the true strength of a kingdom came not from its palaces or armies, but from the trust between its leaders and its people. Citizens of Alderia, Elena began, her voice carrying clearly across the crowd. 2 weeks ago, our kingdom faced a great danger from those who would have stolen our independence and silenced our voices. Today, we celebrate not just the defeat of that conspiracy, but our continued commitment to the values that make our kingdom strong: justice, integrity, and service to one another. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Elena smiled, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead,
She and her people would face them together. I stand before you not as your ruler, but as your servant, committed to protecting the future we will build together.
Long live Aldaria, and long live the free and independent kingdom we will pass on to our children. As the cheers continued, Elena felt a deep sense of peace. The girl who had started this crisis, uncertain about her own strength, had become a woman ready to lead her people into whatever future awaited them. And for the first time in her life, she truly understood what it meant to wear a crown. Not as a symbol of power, but as a promise to serve others with everything she had. The kingdom of Aldaria was safe, its people were free, and Princess Elena Charlotte Victoria had finally found her true calling as a leader worthy of their trust.